And I'm hoping it will because I wanted to show you a few things. First of all, this is what we're doing today. We're doing this. I have spent the day, hopefully it shows off, doing this. And, well, as you can see, it's not got much further because this hasn't really dried still yet. There's a bit of dry batch which I'm stepping on, but a lot of it is not yet dry. However, I have been painting, and many of you have asked me before whether I can do a live from the garden. So, I'm going to attempt to. But also, here is the full office. Now, today, as you can see, there is a very messy corner, which has all sorts of things which have been put up quickly to keep them out of the way. So, sorry about the messy shelf. As you can see, the bookshelves above. This still needs its stabilizer put in. Woo, almost stepped on a damp patch. And as you can see, mainly thanks to this section down here, it was kind of interesting. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the questions on my laptop, and I'm going to attempt to do this via my phone. So, wish me luck for this one. But it is a bit of a proof to those people who have been talking to me recently about whether or not they should start doing YouTube, about how difficult it is to do it. And I've been going, well, really, you can do it, and you can do a practical and hopefully interesting show with minimal technological support. We will see if I am right or if I have been absolutely misled by my own ego. There is always the chance that I have been misled by my own ego. So, if you will give me a second, I will stick that there. Hello. I am in the garden, and I will quickly upload the questions, and then I will start answering, because it's Naval History questions live is what I'm doing, because that's easier for me to do this way. I hope the mic and everything's working okay. It's all done through the phone's mic. I have been sent a lovely mic to attach and lapel system to set up, and honestly, I just haven't had a chance to get it working. I really haven't. It's one of those things. Sometimes you have a chance to do these things, sometimes you don't. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Anyway, so today, as you all know, is this. And hopefully, yes, finally, I've got the things working. And that should all be working properly. And let's see if I can get the questions up on big screen. Please tell me I can get the questions up on big screen, because if I can't, I'm going to be absolutely crying in a second. And I'm hoping it will. Oh. Because... yes, I can get the screen questions up on big screen, so I can pop out the chat, expand it all, and say hello to people. Hello, everyone. Oh, good God, that's minute. Oh, that's better. Sorry, my eyesight's good, but it's not that good. Glad you can hear and see me. Hello, Carmen Gasberg. Hello, Stafford. Hello, John Shea. Hello, Glenn Stewart. Hello, George Newman. Hello, DG40. Hello, Jamie. And hello, Peter Effen. I just found your channel a couple of weeks ago, and I love it. This is subscribing on Patreon for you. Thank you, Peter. Well, as you can see, this is what Patreon money goes towards, mainly. The trip to Canada. The next trip, which is we are starting up, we're going to do some sort of fundraising for, but we are planning. We have, if you've been watching Twitter, we have been doing planning for another naval history trip like we did to Canada. We were considering doing the whole, doing basically Australia and Japan and Singapore in one trip. It looks like there's so much to do in both Australia and Japan and in Singapore that it's probably going to be a condensed trip, because we can't, none of us can afford to go away for what would have been 6 to 8 weeks. So it's going to be condensed down into spread over 2 years and 2 probably 4-week trips. So probably Australia, and you're going to hear and see advertisements about that as we come along. We've got ideas for a conference. So we're working on all those together. And yes, I will try and move this, but the chair might roll here. It is quite funny when it rolls around because I'm on a hill. Our garden is a bit of a hill. And yeah, I've spent the day painting and fixing the office, and I have to get my I do have to get my very good building assistant. Where I've put my glass? My glass has disappeared. I put my glass down somewhere. Unfortunately, I haven't had my very good building assistant around today because he's been off doing, you know, his normal his sword fighting and his, you know, his work like that, which is always terrible. You know, when your primary building help goes away, it's just terrible. But I am hoping to get him over here with his spray paint gun at some point and do the walls again. Hello, IQ442. Hello, Sage. Hello, Cody85. Hello, M55 Benefits again. And Paul, hello. Hope you're well. Hope you all saw the tennis as well as the Formula One today. Tennis was absolutely brilliant. The reason I know that is because my mother is an avid tennis fan, and the amount of shouts of oohs and ahs coming out from the lounge was be able to be heard probably around the whole neighborhood. All I know is there was a gentleman called Nick that she was rooting for, and she was still very happy with the winner because he worked really hard and did really well, but she was hoping Nick would win because he hasn't won it before. Hello, you disappeared off for me. Oh, hello, sorry. I've got to be very careful with this screen, and I've got to be very careful with this phone. And it's the slightest dudger, and it decides to go wanders. Hello. Right. Oh, I'll be back in a second. Just got to get my glass. And it's rolling again. It just doesn't like to stay on its hold, does it? It really doesn't. So, where have I put my glass? Random question, I know. I am back. I think I brought it down here somewhere. There it is. Glass. That's my sister's office. As you can see, my sister is the completed model of an office. Mine is, well, this is the trouble. It's always good making time to help when you've got someone, when you're helping someone else, but actually doing your own office is the thing which happens the least. So yeah, my office is finally getting done, but it has taken a while to get to. And right then, now I've got iron brew, and hopefully this will stay. Ooh, really unflattering position. What have you done? Have you spun round on the back? That's what you have done, haven't you? If I do that, and I leave that, and then that goes like that. Sorry. The hope is kind of like, you know, Top Gear's driving to the Antarctic. It's a hope it'll work, and so show it is a proof of concept. But there's, you know, so far it has been kind of interesting. Guest star the grass. Okay, hello Caddy85. Let's see. So that, why were trawlers used for anti-submarine ops? Because trawlers could get in close to shore. And let's be honest, what are most smugglers going to be in? Probably something which is a version of a trawler. So therefore, trawlers fit in with the trawlers. Odds of fox showing up. There's always a chance. Flying ants have already made a visit. Last time I was working out here, fox did come up and say hello. So there's always a chance. There's more likely to be a corgi or a poodle showing up. We'll leave that to one side. They habitually like to show up. It is, after all, their garden. And they are fluffy and mildly insane. Rather gorgeous, but fluffy and mildly insane. Okay. Hello, Sean Mack. Hello, Paul Beswick. Hello, David Goulding. Stafford, sorry you're not here to lend a hand with the office. Very kind of you to offer. Yeah, honestly, you probably would be. It's one of those things. as I said, the trouble is, if I did have more people here, we'd probably end up working on my sister's office because there's a couple of things which she wants done. And if I had two people, it would probably be tempting to try and do that. Two people, and my office would still not get done. This is what happens whenever there's extra people around. We end up doing my sister's office. Daniel Politics. I'm running away to Duxford. How do I do it? My advice would be to just drive and go to Cambridge. Actually, the Centre Parks near Cambridge is a really nice place to stay if you want to go to Duxford. It's a really nice spot, and the family can have fun in Centre Parks if they don't want to go with you to Duxford. Nice again. Would an 88 anti-ship missile attack on a carrier battle group be how the USSR would destroy US carrier battle group? Probably a lot more than 88 missiles, but depend what the 88 missiles were. You know, if they could 88 of their really massive missiles, really massive and really fast missiles, they'd probably go with that. But again, it depends when you're talking about. If you're talking about, it's one of the things that if you do not want, whilst naval historians love things like Top Gun, etc., we also spend our time going, what? Because the whole point of the Phantom and especially the Tomcat, but all those sort of aircraft which were basically built around massive radars, is they have very long range air-to-air missiles, and they will take you out at long range. And that's what the AIM-54 Phoenix and the Tomcat is the perfect example of. You are over there. You're splat. You're splat. You're splat. Which they actually decided was better for the pilots psychologically, because psychologically the pilots wouldn't feel they were killing people. They'd feel they were killing machines. It's the artillery conundrum, or the artillery result. But again, 88 anti-ship missiles, depends if they're coming from all angles and they're coming in fast, maybe, but they probably want more. Lions, how's the office floor? Still drying in parts, and as I did the video at the beginning, which hopefully shows it off, there are issues. It needs more because it's basically sunk through. Turns out having a floor which was laid, taken up, every time, and laid again using nail guns, because they couldn't get it right, has got a lot of holes in it, and it's sunk through. Daniel Con, hi Code85, Daniel Politics, send Pims. You'll enjoy it in Duxford. Duxford is really nice. Duxford is really, really cool to go to. Andrew Paul, random question. How did the RN's budget look as compared to national budget in times of peace or war from, say, the 1880s forward? I asked since I ended up with about 900 ships in 1910 UK campaign UAD by the end of 1925, when the other four nations had a total of about 200. Too impractical, I know, but how many other, or by how many orders of magnitude? Not as many as you'd think. UK defence budget usually runs between total UK defence budget usually runs between is sort of in peacetime is roughly 3 to 4% of the annual budget, and the Navy tended to get a fairly large chunk of that, but not an overwhelmingly massive chunk of it. So the Navy would get something like 55% sometimes of it. Naval spending was tended to get some priority, but it wouldn't get a massive, overwhelming priority. There is a very good Cambridge book of, or is it Oxford book of statistics, which I have somewhere over there. What you don't realise is, as well as the office all being out to get because there's no space now in the house for the stuff to go back in there. I've had to I had to get a gazebo, erect the gazebo, and all my books, etc., are in boxes in the gazebo, in that direction. I'd say you're welcome to come work out on my office, but I'm 18 months from permanent installation. When that happens, I will gladly come help. Would I be right that a fleet of 2 Essex, 2 Fletchers, and a Gearing with 12 3-inch 50 caliber Mark 33 dual-purpose guns and 24 5-inch 38 caliber Mark 12 dual-purpose guns, okay, aren't going to be able to stop a swarm of Seagull anti-ship missiles from wiping them out? No, they won't. But they'll have a jolly good try at it. But that's a very small in the nicest way. If you've got 2 Essexes and they're only escorted by 3 destroyers, then something has gone seriously wrong a lot earlier. Yes, at Stafford, my mum did get a laugh out of that one. Although she only did see it after the tennis was over because I was instructed not to disturb the tennis. And I know better than to disturb the tennis. Hello, Frank Spillato. And sometimes divide and conquer. While hers dries, we work on yours, and vice versa. Yeah, that never happened. We also did time up on the roof. You have to remember, most of this property, and I have to give Drakenfell his due. Without him, it wouldn't be anywhere near the position it is done. And honestly, he and I, after the builders left to get it through its certificate, he was basically here almost every single day helping me out as we pretty much ripped the entire thing apart, or rather took it apart very carefully and rebuilt a good 2/3 to 3/4 of it. And he also came back later. We stabilized the concrete. We've done all sorts of things with the concrete. There's a whole chain of steps now and things which people don't realize he and I had to build to stabilize one corner because they had a foundation which was floating up here and the ground was down here, and in between was things like styrofoam cups. And yeah, that didn't exactly work because they hadn't pumped in any concrete underneath it. It just, yeah, it was fun. Styrofoam cups and bathroom tile were what we found below the foundation as the hardcore, and yeah, we had to scoop that all out. That's when he bent a hammer of mine. I still don't have that hammer. I'm going to give it to him someday on a plaque, say with the terms of the mighty Drakenfell broke this, or just the mighty Drakenfell. Sean Cookman, hello, Ship's cat has just arrived as well, and sitting contentedly near the tablet now. It's if paw print sharp in chat, she's being chatty today. Oh, good to know. I'll say hello to Ship's cat. Student, hello. Guess the floor didn't hold in its end of the bargain. It's still drying, but also it's probably going to take another 2 bags of floor to finish off the floor. I've decided. I've ordered another 2 and another 2 tubs of stuff, and yeah, there are all sorts of things being done to try and fix it all. Hello, Nicole Ross. On some pictures, the IJ and Kega had a roll bar spoiler. What is that in the pictures? Oh. If I remember correctly, if I've seen that, and it's the thing I think it is from their time when they were experimenting with stuff, including stuff to try and purify the air going across it. Hello, Mikey Cross. You heard a ship's cat was watching. You come say hello. Hello. I seen a ship's cat was watching. Cat. Hello. Yes. Right. So. Right. Frank Spanner, could you please explain the design of dreadnoughts that made them roll upside down when the CVA isn't usually go upright? It all depends on what happens with the turrets. Yes, it's a turret weight and where they get the water in. So if water comes in at certain angles, and if the turrets especially start to move, because turrets, remember, are usually held in by gravity more than anything else, because they're very big, heavy weights, and they're just basically held in place by gravity. They tend to roll out, and if they roll out, then you have lost. Your battleship tends to roll up and roll over. But also, it's the depths of water they get sunk and the damage they can take. Because let's put it this way, to actually sink a battleship takes a lot of doing. It's not an easy thing, is it? Although you give it a try if you thought they were standing between you and food. Yes, it's Zebra. Hello, Zebra. Lots of people seem to like you. It is the corgi co-star. The doggies are usually sharp. Now.
He's a bit surprised to find you where he's expecting you to be somewhere else.
Yeah, we decided to do a garden transmit rather than from your office. Andrew, where would you recommend visiting for a vacation in Britain? I'm half Scottish, half Cornish by family roots, but Cornwall's where we go on holiday because it's beautiful and you can see a lot of stuff. And especially sort of the lizard area is wonderful.
Desert,
there is a voice standing to my left.
Lake District.
Hiding off camera. What do you want to do? You want to go down?
Sure.
Also, there are some really good steam railways in Cornwall, but really the best place for those. There's a few good ones.
Come on.
Right. Andrew also ended with a fleet of 30 Queen Elizabeth-class battleships, plus another 20 Admiral-class battlecruisers in that one. The other nations really didn't like that in war. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't like that in war. I wouldn't like that in war in that period. So, Thompson, could we see a return of the F-14, the Super Tomcat with a rise of hypersonic missiles? Probably not the Tomcat. They probably do it a different way, but you could see a heavy fighter return. I do think there is a potential for the need to something to carry a fairly large missile, and especially with the early generations of laser, then if they're going to be powerful enough to stop a big heavy-duty missile, they're probably going to require a significant portion of weight to be carried. Given the flooring problem you described, might I suggest a roll line alarm? After I've stabilized the floor, it's going to be, after we fully colored the floor, it's going to be painted. And probably not lino, probably just leave it with the paint, because then it's easier to clean and easier for me to repair, as I just have to repaint it. Permeable and 45%. Permeable floor, great for drainage, not so good for other things. I think it's not supposed to be a permeable floor. It's a permeable floor thanks to so many holes being stuck in it with nail guns. Wow, that Argentina fleet does seem interesting. 96001. I would be quite surprised how they support it, but it's desperation and communism. Yeah. How do you bend the hammer? Never ever doubt. Never ever doubt the strength of my good colleague Drakenfeld. He does archery, and he does European martial arts, historic European martial arts. HEMA, both build up a lot of strength. It's kind of like, in the nicest way, never doubt. If you want to be scared in terms of strength, my shoulders and legs will tend to do a lot of work. And the shoulders, because I do a lot of sea kayaking, so that builds up a lot of muscle up there. And the legs, because I don't skip leg day. Even though I have occasionally skipped a cardio day recently. Need to get back to that. Lose the tummy. I was underpinning Mum's house time and replacing main floor joists. Even if I was able to supervise your Atreides, I would have had I would have saved a lot of issues. Oh yeah, yeah. Don't worry. And nicest way, if it hadn't been for, I honestly have the firm belief that if instead of using the trades like we were recommended to, if I had done the job myself, we would have been in a far better place from the get-go. we needed the concrete base done by professionals, and I would prefer to put the money into paying for a specialist concrete firm to come out and do it under my supervision, and then once the foundation laid, build the rest of the thing myself, then have that company come do it again. Especially as Lugard, the make we went for, you really can do that. I highly recommend them. They're very good. If you're in Europe, they're probably the best to get for log cabins. Thank you, nice agree from that. Oh, good lord, they had a lot. It would be interesting to see how they'd support that. Frank's one, obviously, were corgis ever on ships much? Actually, yes, corgis were on ships a lot. There are basically most small dog breeds get taken onto ships at some point. They have a lot of affection for ratters, various terriers, etc. But yeah, corgis also get onto ships, especially ones which have Scottish captains. Seem to a lot of them end up with corgis, and there is a debate. I've seen some paintings of some of Admiral Duncan's dogs, and I think one of them might have been a corgi, but I'm not 100% sure. Cornwall is gorgeous, and it's well. If you're coming on a holiday and you want good weather and you want good history, Cornwall has it all. It has the tin mines, it has gold mines, it has all the China clay stuff. It has steam railways in a couple of parts of it. It has, well, they're mostly actually in Devon across the board, but they're not that far. And it has very good food. And honestly, again, for someone who travels with people who have gluten-free and all sorts of dietary restrictions, Cornwall is an absolute dream to go to, because they always are happy to cater to them. Cornwall has a very simple policy. If you want to pay, they will provide you with food. They're not going to sit there and go, but we don't, but our menu item or our fixed way of cooking this is this. They will go, what is your allergies? We will adjust. I would say the height of summer is never really the best time to go, but because you do find a lot of tourists, but then they do have a lot of stuff open to look after the tourists then. We tend to go September and Easter and various other times in between. So when it's not really the height of the touristy season. Enter thinking about David Drake's The Sea of Venus, where he posited a mixture of lasers and railguns rendering aircraft missiles useless against warships. How impractical is that? Lasers and railguns, if they actually worked, could seriously damage the utility of aircraft and missiles against warships, as they'd make the kill ratio quite a lot cheaper. However, it's getting them to work. But continuing, will Boris Johnson's resignation affect the Royal Navy at all? You'd hope not. You'd hope not. Other than if you're rooting for for someone who's likely to be, hopefully, fingers crossed, pro Royal Navy, you could always root for Penny Mordaunt, because she is actually serving Royal Navy Reserve, and she's declared herself today. Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, has actually withdrawn himself from consideration, saying he thinks his post is too important and he'd prefer to stay in that than go for leader. So I hope he would be retained in that role. And as said, if you are pro-Royal Navy, it would seem Penny Mordaunt is the obvious choice to go to in Conservative leadership teams, because she is Royal Navy Reserve. I'm not getting involved on views on anything else, but I'm saying, quite simply, she is Royal Navy Reserve. And she's one of the really good specialists. She's a captain, Royal Navy Reserve from memory, but she serves in the submarine coordination and working with the subs and the intel and the beach team. So she works at the really high end and has done a lot of very interesting stuff. She's had a very interesting life. Yeah, but that's a more bilge pumps topic normally. But bilge pumps this week is going to be slightly Roman. We've got Simon Elliott coming on, who has really reached the realms of internet fame. Not only did he do a video for History Hit, which is being shared hundreds of thousands of times on movies and Roman warfare, but he got a response video from the really nice Italian guy who specializes in Romans and ancient Roman history. And it was kind of an interesting watch because one of them's coming from an academic background and academic journals and what is written in the journals. And one of them's coming from the, I would say, the reenactment as well, idea at the side of it. And the different takes on various weapons and what they were and how they were was really quite interesting to listen to. It would be a sort of discussion which I'd love to sort of try and actually arrange an in-person discussion. Although I would probably end up politely braining both at some point because that's what the kind of chairperson I am. Hmm. Eh. Nazarene, I have you. I'm not. That question is. Would in the British Imperial Federation, how would the Canadians, Kiwis, and Inuit, India, and South Africa provide help in the British Falklands War? Your previous question, I'm not sure I can work out. They were going to help out in the Commonwealth War as Commonwealth members, so I'm presuming in an actual war, in a war under that scenario, they'd definitely be there to help. But they did a lot of assistance in terms of being Commonwealth powers and NATO allies during the Falklands War. Andrew, would it be plausible to assume that at some point next decade the BAE Tempest gets nailed to Eastern Curious with the F-35s getting transferred to Albion and Bullocks for replacements? Doubtful. Very, very doubtful. If you could get LHDs to replace Albion and Bulwark, then you may get more F-35s, but it's doubtful the Tempest will be navalized because that would add a lot of costs onto the price. And Britain has a very strict two-jet policy. It likes to have two jet fleets, and if you ever notice, they're structured so that one's coming into service as the other one reaches maturity, because really the first decade you have an aircraft in service or anything in service, it takes a long time for it to get really good at using it. But that's also the point at which from that point it peaks and it starts to go down. So Britain's always trying to have a sort of a thing like that, so that when this one's going down, this one is on its way up, and when this one reaches its nadir and needs to be replaced, this one's at its highest point, and then sort of doing that. So Britain tries very much for a two fleet, and Tempest is in the Eurofighter replacement segment, not the F-35. So yeah, that's what you're sort of dealing with. At least I'd imagine when Boris gone the wrong, they won't have to worry about being sent on rather dubious missions into the Black Sea. Oh, I'm sure they'll be sent into the Black Sea. I'm sorry, that's a de rigueur. That's becoming more and more likely every day, basically, with what's being discussed and things. Good luck, George Newman. Mainly from the perspective that at some point they're going to have to break the blockade, and there's probably any task group that goes in is probably going to have a ship from every single NATO ally in it, just to make the point to Russia. We're going in, we're escorting the ships, and we have a ship from Britain, a ship from America, a ship from France, a ship from Italy, a ship from Spain, a ship from Germany, It'll be basically a list of allies, and every single one will be a part of the task group. Every single one that can spare a ship, and Britain, you've got to think, is going to be up there. Probably in those circumstances, considering what's the availability of things, it'll probably be a Type 45. Hi, Tristan. Cody Advo, what was the Navy environment that hasn't seen a major war? We've had the Arctic convoys. We haven't had any real naval battles in the Antarctic yet. But that's as far as we know. You know, some things could have ended up down there, but we haven't ever heard of. Would we ever get you and Lions? Would we ever get you and Drac doing more live streams together? Yeah, if we had had longer at Chatham Dockyard, we might have ended up doing a live stream together from there. Andrew, also with the permanent change in the UK and government change in the UK, and I'm going to. Can the RM potentially get some more funds to increase the size of the fleet in the next 5 to 8 years? The government's already, this is the thing, Boris had already signed up to increase the budget over the next 5 or so years. But the trouble is, increasing the size of the fleet, you can't do it that quickly, because you would have to pay money to actually get the shipyards to build to efficient standards when you're paying them to not. So they'd have to redesign their entire process. And it would have to be an ongoing thing, because otherwise it'd be very expensive, because they would have to hire people, train them up, use them to build, and then fire them. So if you want to slow down, so you would have to do an ongoing actual viable increase and maintain it. Murder is real. You mean Metatron? Yes, I did mean Metatron. I couldn't remember his name. I knew it wasn't Matadon, but I was going, my brain is not processing today. And I only have one screen, so I'm not doing a hunting, etc. Also would have gone to Dr. Clarke, if you get a chance, if you really enjoy the area around Perth, that could be fun. I doubt squad. And please note, we will be advertising the dates of any future trips well in advance. People know where we're going to be, and we would love to organize events with universities. We would love to organize events, dinners like we've had before. And if people want to come and meet up with us and tag along, we'll be more than happy for people to come and tag along. We have a list of people we would like to come tag along with us if they would like to. And we are always happy to add to that list. Hi, Bob Fry. No worries. Oh, but guy didn't. If Canada become the 14th original US state, how would that affect US Revolutionary War and the War of 1812? If Canada joins in the War of, well, also in a nice way, if Canada goes independent as part of the United States, then it's probably not more than just the 14th state. Let's be honest, there's probably a few states added to that, probably about 4 or 5. You get a far bigger United States of America, but also you get a very different Revolutionary War because Britain doesn't have wouldn't have local support. It might make the war actually go on for longer because there's actually viable money coming from the Hudson Bay Company, etc., which requires Canada to support, and there's all the fisheries as well. So, in the nicest way, the British might actually be more. It would actually be more important to the British. Believe it or not, Canada was actually more of an important colony than America at this point in terms of resources. But in terms of the War of 1812, it means Britain doesn't have to defend. It turns that war entirely naval because they now don't have a land border, unless America feels like launching an invasion across the Atlantic, which would be quite interesting to watch happen. But probably wouldn't be ultimately that good politically for them to try and do, because their domestic policy was very much a we will liberate Canada into America, and then they found out the Canadians didn't want to be liberated and didn't want to become American. It's quite disturbing for them, really. It caused an entire issue, a psychological issue in their leadership, which is probably what led to the British and Canadian troops being able to do what they did to Washington, because the leadership was still in shock that the Canadians hadn't wanted to be liberated and join America. That's good. Enabling a fight design for ground use is pretty much always a bad idea. Design requirements tend to mean very different things to focus on design. Also, there's the whole saltwater thing. Let's ignore. I had often thought that if the British had in their Imperial Federation, they'd had that if the British had in their fresh post-Argentine surrender, would be forced to give the British what they wanted from Argentina. Post-surrender, Argentina would be forced to give the British what they wanted. Yeah, but would the British Imperial Federation want anything from Argentina? Probably just to sign up that they'd never do it again. Depends how much it affects the wider communist, anti-communist thing going on at the time. And also would depend if other allies joined it. Sean Coakley, seen a couple of reports that the Chinese are running from being relatively pleased to absolutely rejoicing that former Prime Minister Abe was assassinated. I think this will ratchet up tensions between China and Japan. I doubt it will. It depends. I think myself, it will just probably carry on. The nicest way, it's always good to talk to the people to talk about the loss of former leaders, but practically that doesn't really have much of an impact. If it had been the current Prime Minister, that would have been an issue. If it were, as it's the former one, we're very sorry to see him go. He was quite a good ally from the international stage, but sadly enough, it happens. It's the odd thing. While you're Prime Minister, while you're something like that, you have a heartbeat and people care about you. That's one of the things I often notice with Australian politics. While you're Prime Minister, you're powerful. The moment you're not, boom, you're gone. You're yesterday's newspaper and today's fish and chip wrapper. Dr. Clarke, if the Hudson Bay Company had exploited Canada as the East India Company done, what extent would the Royal Navy and Treasury benefit from the sheer resources that could be drawn upon? First of all, they needed to find a population large enough to sustain it. You always have to remember the East India Company has the advantage of turning up and finding a massive population, which is rather happy to have it in some regards. Not happy in other ways. Please always note, the East India Company is not what you want running your local area, but compared to some of the other options, they were occasionally the least worst option, especially at the beginning. It's one of those disturbing things of history. We often look back, and I often find some colleagues who go back, well, this shouldn't be happening, and you go, yes. And in theory, it wouldn't be happening if it was all. But there is a point at which this group looks like the least worst option. And that's never a good scenario when you're in the idea of when people are in the mentality of looking for the least worst option rather than the best option. You can get some very strange things happening. Andrew Paul, agreed. I was only wondering if someone would be willing enough to shake loose enough funding for about half the development process of Tempest again to get the naval version. Nah, their 35B is fine. That's good. Would a NATO warship destroying a Russian missile shot at a Ukraine cargo ship be an act of war against Russia? If they're doing a United Nations or more probably a European Union and NATO sanctioned convoy protection of a food convoy, then probably not. It wouldn't be considered active war. It would be considered active war if they fired back at the ship or aircraft that launched it. If they take out the missiles coming in, it's not an act of war. It's an act of defense of the convoy. It would be a very grey area, though, because it would depend on, how do I put this politely? Depend on how many missiles were launched, because if you're launching more than one missile, they might not target the right thing. And if you're launching a load of missiles at a pack of ships, which are military and civilian being convoyed, then you have to be very careful you're targeting the right thing, because if those missiles accidentally engage the convoy escorts, that would be an act of war by the Russians, especially on a internationally sanctioned convoy. It's a consequence that could happen. let's put it this way. It's one of the things I prefer to talk about in bilge pumps because it can go about 7 ways to Sunday. And I think, which Royal Navy fleet would have been responsible for the South Atlantic? Probably the Royal Navy itself. And them and the South African portion of the Royal Navy. Go to Idaho. With Johnson and Simon B found. Who do you want to find next? I'll settle for anything they find. I'm not the type who sits there and plans and wants things found. I just want them all found. And preferably marked, recorded, and 3D scanned. If at all possible. A war breaks out between USA and Britain in the early 1900s. How would the naval campaign go on the Great Lakes? The Great Lakes would be interesting because there's technically an agreement which stops warships going in there. But in the nicest way, the first phase of the war would be probably you would end up with actually ships coming in because you can't build ships that quickly. The Americans might still have some of their monitors sitting around, which would be quite useful for Great Lakes work actually. But it would also depend on the season and what was going on, because if the Royal Navy en masse, because if they can do at that time, sends a large fleet, that would be a problem for them. Having some video issues. If I go to tonight. Hopefully it's working. Hopefully you can all see me. From my sense, it seems to be working okay. I'm sort of watching it. Occasionally it's flashing black on me, I'm not sure why. But yeah, it seems okay. Now, it's going through the phone, so hopefully the phone's okay. Doesn't feel too hot mode. Okay. Jason, would they perhaps get permission from the Turks to send the Queen Elizabeth? That could be provocative, sending an aircraft carrier, so they probably wouldn't. And besides, they will probably move fighters close enough into various Black Sea allies. Just pulses a bit. I apologise for the pulses. I have no idea why it's doing it. It could be something to do with the sunlight. There is rather a lot. The only naval combat in the Arctic was probably between two angry groups of fishermen at the angry at other guys for taking the best fishing boats. Well, the Arctic has the Arctic convoys. The Antarctic is possibly angry fishermen. Metatron is gate, yes. Right, yes. But I don't know, did the RN ever send any early ironclads over to Canada and Caribbean to keep an eye on the US? Occasionally they'd wander over for a visit. Not always, but they did wander over for a visit. That's good. Would the War of 1812 even happen if Canada wasn't part of the Empire? That's a big question. Probably still happen because America was still in the throes of Britain being the big bad, and we must do everything we can to oppose Britain. Sort of half their foreign policy was that. General 64 just returned. Least worst option. Are we talking U.S. presidential elections or East India Company that governing a place? It's often the policy in many scenarios. It's why I always tell people, whatever you do, never don't vote. Always have a look at them and go, which is the least worst option. If you can't find a positive reason to vote for a party, look and find the least worst option. The worst thing you want to do is actually waste your vote by not voting. Because then you really can't complain, and also the difference between the least worst option and the worst option can be quite significant. Jonathan Burrow, hi everyone. Hi, Dr. Trevonius. Jonathan Burrow, Hiron, I wondered if Japan had understood the role of carrier forces, if they would built more or smaller ships. Probably would have built more. If they thought they could get away with it, they would have built more. They were trying to build more. This is also apparently British were starting to turn the empire into Commonwealth in the earlier 20th century. Their plans start to happen in the early 1880s. They sort of start to have the ideas. So, yeah. If it had been fully successful, the other colonies become known as how would it affect the world? You'd have a British Commonwealth probably along the lines of almost the European Union spanning the world, in terms of it being a free trade economic and defense bloc. It would have predated the United Nations. If it had been successful and implemented, it probably would have had a major impact on world policy. Sorry about the black frame. I have no idea why that's happening. It's being transmitted over the Wi-Fi. I do apologize. But I don't know, how close were the Quintus carriers being Calabar carriers? Not really that close. There were various ideas to transform them into it, but people then realized that it would require emails to work, and getting emails to work, and if they did work, that's fine, and it would require basically the redesign of the entire front end of the ship, which would take a while. The British liked the idea. The trouble is, it's now making sure people build the other half of the idea, which was why they were Calabar, which was to have LHDs. But now then they went through a period of, well, it was wars of choice, so we can build whatever we want. We can build smaller ships that aren't LHDs. Okay, fine. Well, if you do that, then you've lost the whole reason you could have them, because the idea was to have 2 strike carriers, 2 to 3 LHDs, and have 5 flight decks. It's an argument I've been making the case for a long time. And it was sort of considered back in the 1990s when they first started going. The idea was, you'd have a combined fleet, and therefore you'd replace Fearless, Intrepid, Ocean, Albion and Bulwark as it became, Ocean, Invincible, Illustrious, Invincible, Ark Royal, and Argus. So 7-ish ships with 5. It would have been interesting. Hi, Paul. Any kangaroos on warships? Oh yes, there's been kangaroos on warships. There have been kangaroos on warships. There's been the Royal Australian Navy for long enough. There's been kangaroos on warships. They haven't ever. I don't think they've ever taken an emu on a warship, but that's probably because it would take over the warship and use it to wage war. Emus on the ships. Good luck, Glenn. Who was the most underrated admiral of the War of 1812? I think I've done a video on him. I'm sure I did. My admiral who was in the he was in the Caribbean and was basically organizing and raising his own regiments of troops and advancing and planning the slow and eventual reconquest of America. I've forgotten his name now on top of my head, but yeah, he was good. There's a video on it somewhere. Do you know any books that cover the military, political, and diplomatic consequences of the Royal Navy, British yeeting their transatlantic slave trade? Was there issues with other slave states? There are some very good books. Michael Partridge, I think, wrote one. But most of them are on the international foreign relations and the issues from the perspective of Lord Palmerston and various other prime ministers at the time who came in and were dealing with it for a long time afterwards, and the issues that came up. I would say most of the issues come down to the fact that the British basically go, you can do this, and if you interfere with, if you decide you do not like our patrols, A, we control those territories, and B, we have the largest navy in the world. If you want to disagree with us, you have to fight us. And most people decided they didn't want to fight them. It just wasn't sensible. Take care, Squad. Opinions on the Summers class destroyers. I struggle seeing the point of the Atlantas. If you get one, I can get one less turret on a fraction displacement. The Summers are very good destroyers. The Atlantas are very good cruisers. You have to remember it's not just about in terms of displacement, it's terms of sea keeping, number of turrets, but also ammunition, logistics, how you can deal with battle damage, all sorts of things. There are reasons the Atlantas are worthwhile building. Andrew, emails wouldn't be needed for the QUs to make them caliber. Wouldn't non-nuclear propulsion cause some concerns for power crossing now, similar to what is said for the Fujian? Not particularly. Nicest way, cadabars, email cadabars require capacitors and large power generation capability. The power generation capability on the Queen Elizabeth is there in theory. In theory. Why not go steam catapults for the QEs of the options that you can't get steam off gas turbines? It's incredibly, massively, horrendously inefficient. And they haven't been built for steam pipes. Again, you'd have to rebuild and replumb the entire ship, which you might as well, would actually be cheaper to build a new one at that point. Let's check out the as far as option. You and Drac should stream some Age of Stealth tabletop games. We have plans. We have plans. It could be Drac using his drone. I am in drone range of his house, so it could be him droning over me just to check on what I'm doing. That wouldn't surprise me. I'd actually, could the Iron have justified using one more carrier in addition with Lusty as an air raid on Taranto, given the results they achieved? The original plan was to have more than one more carrier. The original plan was to have Eagle, so it was to be a 2-carrier strike. And honestly, yeah, more carriers would have made. They would have gone with whatever carriers they had available. Next one, Dusty, do you have a opinion on Adam Scott at the Guadalcanal? He tried his best. It's broadly speaking what I go with. I would do a lot before if I was going to do a video, I'll give a more fuller answer than that. I would want to do a lot of research, and I wouldn't want to do it from memory. Matt Flannery, I don't think it would have been a wise decision for America to go war with China to defend Taiwan. I think the chance of America winning will not be good. Do you have an opinion? If they go to war, it won't be good for either side. Jonathan, the Iron 60s decided to be an equal power to USN. How would it go about it? CVNs? More than likely. They'd have to build them, but yeah, it would be interesting, and the British government would be having to pay for it. President, what effective role did the Summers have in the USN in World War II? Fleet destroyers. Fleet destroyers, which they did pretty well. Dear student, if the US doesn't go to war with China or Taiwan, they lose all their allies because none of us could trust the US promises ever again. That is part of the problem, so they actually almost have to. RG, Dr. Clarke, what would a keel-up guided missile battleship be like technically and in military context? Massive. A lot of missiles. I'm not quite sure what the power system would be. Probably something very, very specialist. And pretty darn, possibly nuclear powered, possibly something else. But it would work. It would be heavily armored. because it's supposed to take hits, and would probably be something like an EVE Online scenario. As people said when I talked about it before, it would probably have crew working from within a command bunker inside it, with sort of a safe pod space, and everything is automated as it can do, with a lot of missiles, a lot of guns, and just oodles and oodles of layered defenses and layered firepower. As I got it, you can get steam off the gas turbines. It's not uncommon to build a boiler into turbine exhaust to recover otherwise wasted heat. On ships, it's hilariously inefficient, and to provide you with the sufficient pressure steam for catapult operations, it is really not up there. And the reason I know this is because various nations have tried variations on that system to provide catapult, including I think it was the French with the Charles de Gaulle at one point, and varied on it from afterwards. There have been all sorts of systems tried which have been gloriously inefficient and gloriously terrible. So yes, you can in theory. In practice, no, not for a catabar operation. Not provide the pressure and density of steam necessary for doing that. Not at and again, not at an efficient operational rate. And that's the thing you have to remember. Vistol system is incredibly efficient for launching aircraft. Hello, Vision. Hello, Dodgeman. Hello, goodbye. Enjoyed several weddings and a Dave Matthews concerts. Yes, steam generation and gas turbine. Yes, combined gas. Yes, I know. But the question was in the context of Catabar, and in the context of Catabar, no. It's not going to provide enough. It's basically a case of you can recover steam, but if you think about what's that pressure, the steam coming through, what's that capabilities, that's not the level you need of the steam to operate a Catabar. A catapult barrier system recovery, a steam catapult requires a significant amount of steam to launch a Tomcat, to launch any aircraft, really. No tree, thank you. Resummers versus London. On the answers, you don't get one more turret, you get 3 plus torpedoes, plus short range AA, plus more range. Yeah, I suppose considering in the broadside, but we'll leave it at one side. James Ryan, read Taiwan. Taiwan is a strategic asset for the next decade or so. They produce some of the most advanced silicon on the planet. Beijing having control of those fabricators will be bad. Certainly be problematic. Expect to see someone at some point actually investing in that. We'd hope. Good afternoon. I take it the floor hasn't set. It's getting there. Let's say that's the nicest way to put it. The floor is getting there. What was the French answer to Triple-class destroyers? They hadn't really built them yet, but I presume it would be more interesting destroyers. They were considering some very interesting designs. Basically, you also have to remember that the French answer to the tribals were mostly actually based on the things the tribals the answer to, and that would be the interesting thing of what do they pursue as their own answer? Do they go with a gun destroyer? Vision, would Fab survive war? Look at Ukraine. Chinese vegetarian likely level place. That's the trouble. If they, well, yes, you see, the thing is, the prize for let's be honest, Taiwan's allies is keeping those fabricators going. the prize for China is Taiwan itself. Saying that, I have fought an empire game, sort of a world domination game, and yeah, Taiwan has proved a very interesting place to have strategically a few times. Actually, I'm not sure if you're able to build enough fleet for battleships nowadays. It's a bit like building a Saturn V. You can do it, but the specs and equipment makes it less efficient than other options. You would probably be talking about something different from plate. You'd probably be talking about a version of concrete. Yeah, the armor you probably build the ship with today might well be concrete, or some variation of that, with steel, face hardened steel as one layer, and concrete as the next, and then probably more steel, and then concrete, and then more steel. Peter, I remember a futurist article talking about warships being armed with railguns and missiles becoming obsolete due to point defense radars. Basically, a return to battleships. Comment? It's a nice idea if we can actually get it to work. The trouble is with lasers is their thermal bloom in terms of weather, and the trouble is with railguns is getting the capacitors to work and provide them with power. Now, the way to get around that theoretically is nuclear power, but then you're going to need a range of railguns, so you're going to reinvent the system. And you're probably going to end up with missiles still being part of the loadout because of various other missions. And you know, in the nicest way, it's time. We're not talking. They've been talking about those concepts for about the last 2-3 decades, and they'll be talking probably about them for the next 2 to 3 decades before they actually come into service. I'm fairly certain I will be in my 60s before I see something like that come into service, unless something drastic happens in the world. Aren't some of those kids on China mainland already? For China, yes. For the rest of the world, no. Because they don't tend to trust the Chinese ones. What's more annoying, the fact that you have to finish the floor, or the fact that you probably had to relocate your books? Honestly, reorganizing, sorting, and packing up the books took most of yesterday. Hence, I was doing the floor at about 10 o'clock at night last night. I was laying the floor. Which might be explained why it's been so slow to dry, because it was doing its initial set during night time when it wasn't exactly that warm. And then it's had warmth today, but my office is kind of only gets really warm in the mornings. But Cameron, did Dr. Clarke, did the Invisible not exceed its theoretical max sortie rate at one point during the Falklands due to Harry's stall capabilities? Yes. In fact, by a healthy margin a couple of times. Strider, hello. Hey, boss. Oh, I see you painted your office building thing completely camouflage. Wow, you did an amazing job. Then the military can do it. Oh, thank you. I'd love to be able to claim that one, but no, that is... I was going to say something which could have been so many double entendres, so I won't. I have pretty much survived off with Iron Brew all day. Remember, is that you can't shoot lasers at the horizon. No, but railguns theoretically could be. I'd like to see a laser stop a railgun Fletcher going those speeds. No, but theoretically that's what you'd be trying to use your own railgun for. You'd be literally trying to shoot a needle with a needle. Good luck. That's going to require a lot of processing power, a lot of very, 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 very powerful sensors, and a lot of luck. Okay, so weren't the incomplete US conducting US hulls kept while the US had debate on finishing them as a BBG CG instead of her original Iowa and Alaska class configurations? Yes, I think they were, but it would have been interesting to see what they could have built. So, re-rail guns lasers, they also have to open emit. It can't be done on a vessel below for about 35,000 tons. These components weigh a ton. They're trying. They're trying desperately to build it below the 35,000 tons. Hi, Christopher. To be honest, America's relations weren't great with either England or France at the time. Yeah, in real life, we just fought an undeclared war with France and overtrade. Yes. That being said, as one of the main causes of age was England's lack of respect for US sovereignty, kidnapping US sailors. Well, the trouble was, you always have to remember that one. You had groups of people who didn't sound that different linguistically and spoke the same language, and yeah, there were some sailors who were British who claimed to be American and try and avoid being pressed, and there were probably some Americans who were pressed. In fact, certainly some Americans who were pressed. So, but the thing is, there was no proof, really, as far as the British were concerned. Not enough to justify not taking what was considered a very high quality sailor. They needed them. So, yes, it gets interesting. I'm getting blackouts too. Ah, sorry. It seems to occasionally flash black. I have no idea why. Don't want to fire. Ooh, I'll get to that question in a second. Looking at how the dog's doing. Well, the trainee assistant, fluffy research assistant, will be going through has gone through their upgrade, and we will at some point be announcing their upgrade to assistant fluffy research assistant with appropriate ceremony. However, that ceremony will be waiting on the actual office being completed. We have had that discussion. There was a ruling. It was unanimously agreed they'd done enough work to earn themselves out of the trainee part of their title. So the smaller one will become the assistant fluffy research assistant, the AFRA, and the fluffy research assistant is doing really well. If they keep up their publication record and their hard work and research so far, we have no doubt that in due course they will make it to senior fluffy research assistant. Paulinus, how do you see the British military structure over the next 20 years, assuming nothing drastic happens? I can always hope that someone actually has a memory and starts going, hang on, maybe make it turning the Royal Marines into a really, really ultra light force is not the ideal answer to every scenario. I'd prefer them to have their own APCs. I'd prefer them to be a medium weight force. But we'll see. Because I don't think myself ultra light is necessarily the answer to the world we're now dealing with. I think if you're going in with a scenario and you're going to have vehicles, etc., which can effectively be taken on by a T-54, T-62, which are turning up more and more around the world, and even some T-72s are getting out there, etc. I think you need things. You need actual APCs with wheels, and I'm not sure whether. The trouble is, I'm not sure whether the vehicle procuring for the army would necessarily fit what the Royal Marines would need. Although it's big and heavy and quite good. Mm-hmm. Paul Bim, if given a choice between Alberg or T-45 for mass production on World War II Fletcher class, which do you feel would be a best choice? Oh, good lord. You see, the reason I would go against the Arleigh Burke is its size of crew requirements and its the amount of missiles etc. it requires. It is going to require a lot more effort to fill up and maintain them. And crew them. So probably go with the Type 45, but that's mainly based on the crew and the fact that the hull and design is actually newer. So I'd probably go with the Type 45, but that's purely based on the fact that Type 45 is more easier to do support and sustain at a larger mass. If I wasn't worried about personnel and crew and cost and all the limitations that real world impose on you, I'd probably go with a Burke simply because we know how to build them so well, and because they can carry so many missiles and so useful. But if I'm having to actually deal with the real world practicalities, I'd probably go with Type 45 because it's just that much easier to sort of support. However, I don't want to go far up Disciples of Biplane, but are there any books on the Catalina besides maybe Eyes of the Fleet? Not really good ones. There's some good ones coming, but they aren't out yet. Let's see. If the Free French had employed their large destroyers and your choice of crews in the Pacific, how will they do? They'd be an interesting group, especially if you could have had them in the early Pacific War era. It would have been really quite interesting if they had been around for the early Pacific War. If I don't know if the French had said, look, what we'll do is we'll move our navy out to our Far East bases, so they're a long way from from German interference, and they secure our Far East bases from things like the Japanese. That would have been really quite an interesting force to have out there. Right, it would be so complicated back then. What is British and what is American? Back then, it's literally hearsay and opinion, pretty much correct. It's problematic, certainly. And especially when you're dealing with sailors, because they're going to know about ports anyway, so what's their proof going to be that they're American? You have knowledge of American ports? Oh, really? So does everyone else here. Will it be a knighting ceremony, but you'll use the fluffy torpedo in lieu of the sword? Possibly. Possibly. And everyone, what comes after senior fluffy research assistant? Head fluffy research assistant or lead fluffy research assistant? No, the fluffy researcher. They just become the FR, the fluffy researcher. That is the highest level of fluffy research assistant, the fluffy researcher. Again, what weapon system do you see having the biggest impact in the future Pacific War? That's a difficult one, because it depends on where and how the war's fought. Because if it's an open ocean one, then it's probably going to be missile. It's probably still going to be, at the moment at least, in the next short-term future, missiles, and especially hypersonic missiles. But if it's fought in the South China Sea and various other places like that, it very easily could be mines. John Brown, not naval rated, but your opinion on the German Panther tank of World War II? I'm not the biggest fan. I think it's technologically a lovely idea, but I also think that they're putting a lot of tech and research into developing a very complicated design when they could have been putting their efforts into updating, upgrading, and improving the Panzer IV, which they were able to actually support in mass production. And I think if they'd made a upgunned Panzer IV, which had better armor but slightly easier, quicker production, that was made to be more simple and easy to maintain, they'd have probably been in a far better position. Because, let's put it this way. Let's say I have the best tank in the world, so call it the 100% solution on one side. But I only get 30% serviceability about them. So 30% availability. And I have 10 of those, but that means I have 3 tanks available to fight at any one point. And let's say you on the other side have a 75% solution tank, Sherman style vessel. But that gets about 70% availability. And for every one of my tanks, you can build 5. Okay, so I have 300%, 3 super tanks. But from your 50, your standard availability, let's say, I said 80%, let's go and put that on 60% just to be nice, is 30. So you have 30 tanks which are at 75%. Well, by my count, that's 2,250% versus 300%. Who's going to win the fight? Probably the person who's able to turn up with 30 tanks to your 3. Because, yeah, they're available. And yes, you have 3 amazing tanks. But they have to be amazing every single time, and they have to win every single time, because my tanks only have to win once to knock you down to 2/3 your strength. They only have to win twice to knock you down to just one remaining vehicle, operating vehicle. And you have to win every single time because there are 30 of them coming at you. They're gone. Dr. Clarke, don't worry about the concrete taking time to set cure. A slow set is best for the concrete. A fast set can fracture within the floor and be very dusty. And time served bricking. That's good. Well, yeah, Dad and my sister had a similar view. It's useful having it at home civil engineer you can call upon. Yes, he is soon going to go through his induction program to upgrade him to, as said, assistant fluffy research assistant. I don't know. Speaking of sisters. You brought out your water bowl. Why have you come out to join me?
It's too hot, he's decided, inside.
So he's come out to keep Papa company?
Yes.
Okay. Alright.
To avoid the senior research assistants.
He's not been promoted yet. He's still the assistant fluffy research assistant. He's still the fluffy research assistant, not senior fluffy research assistant. He hasn't been promoted yet. We've done the ceremony for this one. We'll do the ceremony for this one. We've made a decision. We haven't done the decision and process for Raleigh yet. Well, yeah. What's he eating today? A lot of grass? Ugh. Yeah. Actually, on subject of modern wonders, do you think the so-called rods from God have been put in orbit? I hope not, but I wouldn't. It's a very simple process to actually build them, so it's not something I would want to doubt too much. Did you mention that you're writing for Osprey Publishing? I'm working on some books for Osprey. They haven't yet signed the contract, so yes, I'm hoping to. Actually, we're supposed to be doing some writing this weekend on that, but yeah, this kind of took over the weekend, and looks like it's going to take over the Monday, Tuesday, and most of the week. So that could be problematic, considering I was supposed to get something to them for the 16th. We will see what I can do. But guys, is Australia still getting SSNs? And if they do, is the UK going to build them? As far as I know, Australia is getting SSNs. They haven't changed their mind yet. And is the UK going to build them? I don't know that. I would say that's more probably sensible for them than the Americans building them. But well, actually, no. I think the Australians will build them themselves. I think where the reactor modules get built will be interesting. I think they'll probably be built in the UK because we've got the free slots to do it, whereas the Americans haven't, unless they do go for an entire build. And then the Americans would have to either set up a whole new line, or they'd have to come to the UK because we have spare bays. How's that to go? In your opinion, what's under the Surkoff? It's a mystery, but I'm probably going to lean towards mines, as most of the unexplained losses of submarines in World War II seem to be mines. Sure, my theory is that someone decides the French cruisers end up in a cruiser action, and that belt armor is useful things. Yeah. That belt armor is so not good for fighting. Hi, Beauregard. Does the Royal Navy have sufficient missiles and ammo for all the ships since the government has given all the supplies to Ukraine? A, they haven't given all our supplies to Ukraine. B, the Navy's ammo hasn't been given away. The Army might be a different matter. But as the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace said the other day, the British government have got to make a larger purchase of weapons and got to start buying more ammunition and actually get it rebuilding the stockpiles, because repeated governments have made the decision that wars were wars of choice only. So therefore, we didn't need the things, did we? Hello, you. Hello. Oh, you're cute. You're very cute. Yeah. Sorry. Not a usual topic of discussion, but what do you think of the theory Jack the Ripper was a seaman sailor? It's always a possibility, as much a possibility as he was a surgeon, a butcher, or a lord. Honestly, there are some very compelling books and research. There's one put out by a very good historian. What was her name? I can't remember. But she put up a very good book, and it was very interesting to read. And I thought, that probably fits, but I have no real idea. It's not an area of research for me. It's more a case of I teach in London and I'm British, so of course I've had to do some stuff. I've had to read the books just because I get the questions. Frank, let's see. What were any wrong lessons taken from World War I and fed in World War II? Probably the idea that light weapons could stop aircraft, because aircraft have got bigger and heavier. Colin Cameron, if we saw an Indian-Pakistan style face-off between Ukraine and France, how do you think this would affect both navies? UK Channel Squadron or a large Mediterranean French deployment? Both. And probably a larger British presence at Gibraltar just to bottle up the French deployment. Maybe get some SSKs and stick them at Gibraltar. But guys, how long do you think the Philippines could have held out if the US didn't lose its air power right away? That's an interesting what if. Because the primary reason they lose their air power quite so quickly isn't just the Japanese attack, it's that the command staff of the US and the Philippines goes to pot because MacArthur hides in his hotel room. So basically life happens. You need more a case of an active command structure, and you need the air groups not to be destroyed, and you need some alertness in terms of the higher ups. I think from what I've read, the colonels and below and a few of the generals certainly were alert enough. The ones above were the issues. Stafford Thompson. Two big cools of dog food, Bethman. I guess they got yesterday. Right. That's a big lift. Okay, Carful. Could you do an item sometime about Malacca Strait involving the sinking of Hagoro by several British and Allied destroyers? Yes, I've heard plan that. How is it? Your sister has made 2 appearances in 2 weeks. Yeah, she likes to appear. Although she claims she doesn't. I keep telling her she needs to start an engineering channel. I think she would be very good at doing an engineering channel, and I think it'd be a good way for her to, in nicest way, start advertising her research and her work, because it's trying to get, especially my female colleagues in academia, to get involved in social media and promoting their work and their research, because to be honest, they always seem to be more shy about it as a rule. I do not know why. I do know why. They tend to face harsher criticism, but as I explained to my sister, she does have an advantage. She has the fact that she both taught Drac, and she's my sister, and both of us do this quite a lot as well. And nicest way, both of us would be quite online verbally protective if anyone was being rude to her. Which you probably shouldn't have to say, and probably shouldn't face it like that. But I'd like her to do some engineering stuff. I think she'd be good. I think it'd be fun. Because she does some great displays, and she's a geotechnical civil engineer, and things like how are we stabilizing the Isle of Wight, she's working on that. How do we build underground tunnels? How do we build all sorts of things? Are her bread and butter, and it's the stuff she can explain, and the way it straddles, and some of the diagrams she puts together with her data are just amazing. But it goes nowhere other than academic presentations. I remember this being part of doctrinal arguments about tanks. I think it was a chieftain. The 5-to-1 Sherman partly comes because 5 tanks was a platoon, and what you take, after all, why fight fair? Yeah, you don't fight fair. There is no... The idea, this is my main trouble with top trumps whenever it's put in agreement, is you do not fight 1v1. You don't fight like that. That's not how you do things. But there is also a bit of a scenario when you come to... I can still complain. It's one of the issues that comes up with the cruisers and the heavy cruisers, especially when I'm evaluating them, is that whilst they're by treaty definition, because they've got 8-inch guns, heavy cruisers, doesn't make them a heavy cruiser. And this is the point I keep making. People then go, well, you're getting into top Trump's obsession. I'm not. It's just, there is a reason why why the British are looking at the treaty cruisers and going, you know what, the 6-inch cruiser works better. Why? Because we can still kill an 8-inch cruiser with a 6-inch cruiser, and it can do a lot of other stuff as well with those 6-inch guns, whereas the 8-inch guns can really are a bit of a limiting factor in some regards. And you sit there and go, wow. When you start looking at it from that perspective, and you go pre-radar especially, same effective combat range in terms of effective realistic engagement range is between the 6-inch and 8-inch. The 8-inch has a theoretically further firing range, but it doesn't in effective kill ratios. They work out that the actual effective the difference between the effective ranges in terms of combat is within 300 yards of each other at one point pre-radar. My sister was a PhD, was a doctor before I was. She's never been never been a researcher. She taught Drac when he was doing his civil engineering degree. When he was doing his degree in engineering, one of the people who taught him was my sister. I work at the uni with his brother. Yeah, this is the reality of us. We are very connected in disturbing ways. And I'm only prepared to say that because I know once he did actually respond to a comment on my channel questioning whether I really had a PhD and whether I was really a lecturer with the response back. He works with my brother. I know he teaches at my old university. I know I am 100% sure about his qualifications and what he does. There's Fox. Do you know a good way to clean dry blood off a phone case, and a way that does not stain either? Usually, I would start off by putting it in something cold, and then wiping it off with. This is speaking from someone who has a family of siblings who, well, has a sibling and other family members who get a prolific, get some very bad nosebleeds. The experience of it has been freezer to get it nice and cold, and then wipe it with some kind of alcohol-based sterile wipe, and tends to come off. To be a tad fair to the Panzer V Panther, there's several cheapish assault guns tank hunters produced, and Germans suffered from a lack of crews anyway. Yes, and I agreed on all these, but in the nicest way, no. They were bad at managing their industry, what they did have. They kept going after the fancy, the fancy stuff, the high techie, and not thinking about the reality. Strider, does she have any interest in your field of interest? No. My sister builds stuff. My sister is a geotechnical civil engineer, a really, really good one. And I'm, of course, a naval historian. We have talked about joining together to write a book on sea defenses, both the military and civilian ones, and the history of them. But we haven't, so far it hasn't evolved into anything. Basically, doing a joint book because it would be dedicated to our mum, and she'd like it. But that's the only area we can go. We could maybe join forces on. Stafford, there hasn't been, in the nicest way, the aid that has gone on Ukraine has been in many ways a rounding error in the UK budget. There are different ways of accounting for it, but honestly, no, it's not that much of a problem. It's not that much of an impact, and it's fairly sensible to put the aid into Ukraine, because whatever blunts Russia there probably means that Britain doesn't have to fight Russia at another point. Because the worst thing you can have with a dictator, let's be honest, and Russia is a dictatorship. Whether you like Putin or not, he is a dictatorship. As a rule with dictators, the more they win, the more they push for more. So anything which blunts and means they don't win tends to stop them pushing for more, and that's the advantage. That's the reason to supply Ukraine. Ultimately, if you want to be cruel. Guys, did the US have any bug guy? Did the US have any guns that could threaten NATO's warring if Great Britain got into war with the US in the 1860s? Probably some of their forts did, but in terms of naval warfare, they didn't really have any ships that could threaten her. I've talked about the theoretical discussion, the fight between her and Monitor before, and a few other things. Basically, if the British ironclad fleet gets involved, if it's an at-sea fight, they have a serious trouble. If it's a close inshore fight and Warrior can neither maneuver nor turn on her speed for some reason, then there is a chance for Monitor, but that's a very small chance, and that requires on Warrior not actually being at speed. If Warrior's at speed, she can probably run down the Monitor and ram it, let alone sink it any other ways. Polemus, what are the chances we continue the current defense secretary after the new PM is elected? Not who will be the best person, and if not, who? I hope it would be, considering he's announced the reason he's not contesting is because his post is that important. He wants to stay in it. I'd say it'd be very sensible to leave him there. It does make him very powerful as a kingmaker, perhaps, in staying in that post. And if not, then it depends who wins leadership and who's available at that point. Hello, Nook. Raji, Duckluck, what would have changed if the high sea fleet hadn't been scuttled and laid dispersed? I don't know if that's been asked. If that I'm not sure if it's been asked before, possibly, but I don't mind answering it. If the High Seas Fleet is dispersed amongst France, etc., and all the allies, then there is no way the British are agreeing to a treaty which stops their own construction, because that would be too much of a boost to all sorts of other powers who may or may not be British Anglo friendly. And look, I think you beat the heavy cruiser idea to death during the Northampton episode. They're not a heavy cruiser, they're a scout cruiser. They're a very good scout cruiser, but you are going to be hearing this a lot. There are a lot of heavy cruisers coming up and being looked at, and I will be hammering that point. But again, how would the Pacific campaign go if General Patton or Bradley had replaced MacArthur before the war started? Patton, it's kind of interesting because he really is an armor specialist, so I'm not sure how much of an armored warfare he would actually, although there again, if he's deployed to the Pacific, there's no way he doesn't have a whole load of tanks sitting on the Philippines. Somehow, by hook or by crook, he'd have a whole load of tanks sitting there and organized. And the moment the Japanese landed, they would find tanks swarming towards them. The Japanese have tanks, but they don't have that many with them. So that could be interesting. Both him and Bradley are far more active and far more consistent than MacArthur. MacArthur can have strokes of genius, don't get me wrong, but his ego does not. His ego writes checks he cannot cash. But those two are far more consistent performers. Sounds like why I've always said I'm happy to participate in a fair knife fight. Well, waiting to point out that, as far as I'm concerned, I've got a firearm for a fair knife fight. It's a viable system. But Guy Dillon, how will the Pacific campaign get? I've answered that one. And sounds like your system may do well to partner with Grady at Practical Engineering. He does a fair amount of civil engineering content. That'd be good. Straight up. I thought coal was best for fresh blood, not tried blood. Actually, it works quite well for both in experience. I said lots of nosebleeds, and nosebleeds, the blood goes everywhere. The sort of sea defenses where, hey, petrol floats on water, there's just the sort of defenses which would involve building fortifications and those things. She's not around at the moment, she's inside, probably because the fluffy research assistant has been eating grass today, and we all know what happens when a fluff eats grass, and they're not a rabbit. Neither of you are rabbits. Both of you occasionally eat grass, don't you? That's not really smart things for you to do, is it? Shamak, the Philippines were lost. The physical infrastructure makes it impossible to defend. I'm not sure about that. There are... It's difficult to... Okay, it's possible to... Let's put it this way. You may or may... There are different ways to lose it. The Philippines, it could be a far bloodier, far longer campaign, especially for the Japanese. And there is a potential of winning, but if you do win, remember the Japanese Navy still dominates and they will turn up. But then that could lead to an interesting naval battle, and could have, of course, led to the whole USS Robin scenario happening earlier, and could have ended up to a joint Anglo-American carrier task group actually fighting a battle. But what would you have built instead of the Deutschland-class cruisers? I would have gone in with something with about... I would have probably gone with the same hull. I would have gone with probably 8-inch rather than 11-inch guns. Or if I had gone with 11-inch guns, I would have gone with 6 twin turrets rather than 2 triple turrets. And probably, there are ways I would like to modify that ship. I would, in a nice way, if I'm going to cheat, I'm going to make it longer. I'm going to make it a sort of a standout vessel. And I'm going to do, I would probably, again, 8-inch guns. And yeah, range, but I might... See, the thing is, I might include a scenario where I could get higher speed. So I might try and go for a 4-propeller layout or something. 4-shaft layout. Anything that could give me more speed, eh? Because, honestly, I need to be able to get the 30 knots. I don't need to necessarily be able to keep it up for long term, but I need to be able to get to 30 knots to have a decent chance of being a surface raider. And I don't really need more than 8-inch guns for doing that job. Having anything else might be prestige. Having bigger stuff might give me prestige, but it doesn't give me actually any viability for long-range operations, and it allows me to carry more ammunition. Remember, the 11-inch guns are barely used because they don't have enough ammunition for them. Whereas the sort of, they have to use torpedoes and the secondaries to sink things, and it's almost wasteful. It's inefficient. For example, how surprised were you to see the Decimus Sharnhorse still in good shape on the Falklands? There is some very good water around there for preserving ships. I have heard of that already, so, I was surprised because it's in very good nick, but I wasn't massively surprised, if that makes sense. Would you like the RM to have... Dr. Line, Dr. C, would you like to have the Royal Marines to have the new IP if the US Embassy have the BAE one? Yes, I think that would actually be a good fit for them. Next one, Dr. C, would you be surprised if the Italian Navy really steps up its game in the modern world? It'd be quite nice to see, actually, because the Italian Navy produces good ships. Like I'd like to see the Danish Navy being bigger, because they produce some very good ships. Well, RG, in the High Seas Fleet, I wonder what more would have happened if it made the treaty here in German hands and progression beyond. If it's still in German hands, then World War I hasn't happened, because there is no way the British allow the Germans to restrain that fleet after World War I. They just wouldn't. They would keep fighting until it was gone. Hello. What are you after? You're after something. Oh, what do you want? You want to go in for a biscuit? You can't go in for a biscuit. Your brother's in there. So the thing is, if they make it to the 1920s, that means World War I hasn't happened, which means the treaties probably don't happen. But if you did have some sort of treaty scenario, expect Germany to try and finagle its way to at least the Japan position, in which case the British would not be part of the treaties. Oh. Yes. They all agree with me. You should start a civil engineering channel.
No, I don't think so.
Yes, I do.
I spend too much time talking.
It'll be fun. Please stop walking into doors, though, because it's going to give me a bad name at some point. And it's...
I fell.
You fell into a door. Yes, that's even worse. I don't know. Trouble. Being the only guy who lives with girls. When one of them walks around with a black eye, everyone's looking at you going, what? And no. The one who doesn't do anything in terms of clothes shopping, and I have to remind her to, has managed to trip up over her own clothes and fall into a door. Woohoo! Hallelujah! Right then. No, Fluff, you did not trip up your sister.
I think she didn't spill my food.
I know, Fluffs eat grass on purpose when their stomachs are upset to cause vomit. Yeah, that's normally what happens. But in the case of R2, sometimes they just eat it because they're a bit stupid. And I can tell this because I know my dogs. disturbingly enough, on that front. The wind's picking up a bit. I might have to tie that gazebo down a bit more. Poemus, what is your ET finish for the office? Well, it was supposed to be finished today, because it was supposed to all be done today, and instead it's probably going to be finished whenever the new flooring arrives, because I've had to send off for more. Then once that's in, I can build the shelves. So the building the shelves will probably take a day. The flooring will probably take another few hours, at least as probably another day to dry, add in and dry. So probably, if the flooring arrives Monday, it's probably getting finished by Tuesday. If it doesn't arrive, then I'll probably use the office temporarily for recordings, etc. until the stuff does arrive. Then it'll be in and out and done, hopefully. So probably this week it gets finished, barring the orange paint and the white paint. The orange paint for the walls, the white paint for the shelving, because that's probably going to require me to get around my building colleague to come and help me. I'll probably need a second person. 3 twin 11-inch gun turrets. Not 6 twin 11-inch turrets. I think I was also thinking about maybe possibly 6-inch guns. As for the expected tower PC up and running, let's see. Depends when university paychecks arrive, because they've managed to delay and not pay me properly. So leaving that to one side. I love them dearly, but university payers are becoming the least reliable of income streams. And then I can order stuff, or alternatively we'll have to order a tower unit and buy a tower unit, in which case that'll probably wait till after I've done Justin Craig in August, because they're a very nice company and they pay enough money that I could buy the computer outright as a tower, or I could buy the components earlier. It's going to depend on what happens, basically. Hopefully I'm going to be able to build a tower, or build a tower in either September or August. Or I have to buy one that will keep me going for a bit until I can build one. It's the market in graphics cards. It's just extortionate, and they go really fast. And you have to have the money available when they're available, and so far those two things haven't synced up for me. Also, they question you and not your family's hand-eye coordination. Look, it happens. I love my family, I do, but they're all clumsy as anything. Let's put it this way: dyslexia and dyspraxia run in the family. I got dyslexia. Okay? And I love them dearly. But there are times when I'm literally going, no, put down the power tools, leave it for me. Please, put down the power tools. And there are levels of dyspraxia, like there are levels of dyslexia and differences within it, and, you know, it depends on your variation. Please note I'm saying that before the Dyspraxic Association gets annoyed with me. They're lovely people, but I don't want them annoyed with me. And especially don't want the dyspraxic I live with annoyed with me. Excellent, let's see. Alternate question. The UK managed to hold on to Western France from a long time ago. The Angevin Empire. That'd be fun. How definite if we still get the Germans taking over Dunkirk? If they've been holding on to it for that long, there are probably some heavy fortifications built. Can we hold on to all of it? Probably not. Brittany, definitely. The rest, it's going to be interesting. But more would have been the wars with Napoleon, etc., which would have led to some seriously heavy-duty fortifications. Icons crash. Paul. Reference. German fleet gets divided up between allies. I had a solution where 24 ships. UK gets 3 battleships and 2 battlecruisers. USA gets 3 battleships and 1 battlecruiser. Germany gets to keep 4 NASOs, 3 header governments get scrapped. This scenario, Bayern and their film class in US and UK hands, plus older ships for France. UK not want, still not. No, it doesn't. And honestly, the UK wouldn't want to keep the German ships. This is the main trouble for Britain. Getting those ships would be an absolute nightmare. They don't want them, but they'd be accounted for in their strength. But logistically and training wise, they are going to be an absolute nightmare because they're it's the example. Hello, it just went boom and then back to live. Okay. Speaking of a certain gentleman, he is now pottling around me. The fluffy research assistant has arrived. He's behind me. Hello, you've come to say hello. What have you come to do? Oh, you found a water bowl. Hello. Oh yes. You saw the wall. Oh, you're at that side, are you? Well, you're after my hat. You're not getting my hat. It's going on my head. Or you nick it. But no, the British don't want those ships. The British really don't want those ships. For the smaller powers, they make sense. For the larger powers, they cause a lot of problems. And again, you're giving America an immediate increase in their ships, their ship quality, potentially, and all the technology that we shared. It's just not a good idea. It's not something the British would want to happen. But so if people get Washington, if the German High Seas Fleet gets to get increased, the British are not accepting the Washington Naval Treaty, which involves them losing ships. Well, no, that's what it's, when I say involves them losing ships, they do not cancel the admirals, they do not cancel the G3s, and they do not cancel the N3s. They build them all. No, sorry, that may be changing promptly with the decreasing crypto prices. We can hope. That's right. Anyone read the Royal Navy Day by Day? Is it any good? It's good for if you like that thing. If you like that style of book, you're going to really enjoy that book. Mm-hmm. So, Dr. Clarke, if I were allowed to build a super cruiser and leading up to war, presume World War II, or we would have 3 twin 14-inch guns based off Renown, but stretched closer to hood with more anti-air and torpedo defenses. Why would you stretch it to look, I can understand the desire to stretch it to the level of hood, but if you're only going to have 3 twin guns, you've got enough hull space that honestly you can pack the power you need for the speed into the smaller sort of Renown style hull, and then you have far more facilities you can use for infrastructure and support and maintenance and all the things you need. You enjoying this? You like it outside? Yes, you do. You try and nick my hat, I will chase you down. But don't do it. Andrew Paul, wouldn't other nations have just as much a headache operating their own ships? It's different if you're a smaller power. If you are a power which is maintaining 4 ships and you have 4 of your own and you have 4 ships which are a completely different supply chain, then that's doable because it's a 50% of your force, so it's worthwhile doing. If you're Britain and you're talking about having a having 20 odd ships of one supply chain and then 4 of another, then that's suddenly very expensive and it's an entire thing which is beyond belief. Why are you doing this? It's a logistical and operational nightmare. Where are they going to operate? What are you going to use them for? Where are you going to sustain them and support them? And also look at where the supplies come from. For the UK, all those supplies would have to be imported from Germany. That's not a good place to support supplies, and that's going to be actually paying in for German infrastructure, so no. ECH, do you collect ship hats? I have a couple of duplicates from the ships I served on that you're welcome to. Not to the extent that Drac does. But yes and no. If Drac hasn't got them, and it doesn't want. If Drac, let's put it this way, give Drac first refusal. If he doesn't want them, yeah, I never say no. And considering what France and Italy are going in a common chances are that foreign ships don't end the service at all. Those foreign ships, you have to remember, with France, the foreign ships that ended service were their cruiser force. The German light cruisers that they received were critical for their cruiser strength for much of the 1920s and 30s. Those German origin ships were essentially their fleets. So yeah, but remember that's also part of the British calculations with going into the Washington Naval Treaty, etc. You're not being argumentative. It's the difference in scale. When you're dealing with a navy which has 20 of one ships and you suddenly get 4 of the others, it's a small class. It's what are you going to do with them? When you're dealing with a navy which only has 4 and you get 4 of them different, well, then it's viable. It's 50% of your force. It's worthwhile doing. In fact, a lot of decisions that seem to not make sense on a level of, wow, this ship has more guns and they're getting rid of it. This ship is better armed and they're getting rid of it. I don't know why. Come down to logistics and training. And that's, again, for supporting the German ships, that's an entirely different training pipeline. That's an entirely different engineering support pipeline, entirely different logistical pipeline. There's no similarity at all. You know, the Bayern class, which on the face of it are as similar to the Queen Elizabeth as you can get, and they are so completely different. There was no chance of operating together as a group. The British did the tests and worked it out. There was no chance. And trust me, the British would have loved to have picked up a free 15-inch battleship, but it just wouldn't work. But again, do you think trading USS Arkansas and New York class for 2 Lexington-class battlecruisers would have been worth it and possible during the Washington Treaty talks? Yes, an Arkansas and New York and the New York class. So you're trading free for 2. If you could trade 2 for 2, yes, it'd been worth it, and it would have been probably possible. But it would have also led to the British demanding more 16-inch ships. So the British would probably have got a 3rd and maybe even a 4th with the Nelrod class, which would probably have been fast battleships, because they'd probably gone, do we need more battle cruisers, or do we want a fast battleship? So they'd probably gone the F3 design rather than what they did. So they'd have gone with the faster 28-knot version. Talking about battle per Cape Spartivento, but the Italians have a pair of Bayerns. How do things differ? Painfully for the British. Painfully. If the Italians have a pair of Bayerns there, then they've had ships they've been working up for a long time, and they work together. As it is, yeah. Basically, it's a lot of firepower extra in terms of effectual firepower. Let's see. Was there any personal account of war by a non-officer that you were really impressed by? With Navy wing and I think there's a few chapters in the Flying Eight, the book about the eight Squadron Royal Naval Air Service, which is really good, and there are a few good accounts. I don't remember them as much because they are very rare. There are some good ones. Chris Rand, the poodle has a solid white front. Yes, he's a party poodle. He's a tuxedo party poodle, to be precise. So he's always ready for a formal engagement. No, sometimes I can understand why you want to stretch out. You can get better length to beam ratio, you can get higher speed theoretically, and all those things. And that's all good ideas. But the trouble is, then there's a practicality on the other side, and that's what the limiting factor is. Really, it's the practicality, not the best ship would be as long as Hood. The best fit, the strategic, the individual ship, will be a Hood. The best fit for what you need would be the Renown length vessel. That's also why are some events in Royal Navy history which would be seen as too fantastical in a fiction and fantasy novel. Oh, good lord, the amount of weird stuff they did in terms of boarding and diplomacy, boarding operations. They did some really weird boarding operations. There was one example where a young boy boarded a ship. A young boy, I call him because he was a middy. He was a middy, and he boarded a French ship through the cannon port. Basically, they clash together. Ends up leading his team across, and he fights his way up to all the way up to the deck, to the main deck, and basically fights his way through. And you just sit there and go, how do you make it? How does it happen? It's not Southampton. It's not misguided. It's the thing is, you're talking about what is the best ship to build. Yes. But what you have to think is sometimes the best ship to build isn't always the best ship to build because of the strategic nature of actually being able to support it, infrastructure-wise. There is no point having a ship which is competing with Hood over limited facilities for Hood to use in terms of length, unless you're going to build the infrastructure as well. So the thing is, if you're going to build infrastructure to support it, that's great. But that's a whole different ballgame in terms of money. You can get cruisers with renowned size, super cruisers with renowned style layouts. We can talk about the twin 14-inch, but yeah, that's available because that's King George V class. What issues would have been? Why couldn't it be operated with Queen Elizabeth? Very different style acceleration profiles, very different style maintenance profiles, very different style in terms of its needs for operational requirements, and it just didn't fit. They tried a couple of things where it operated alongside Queen Elizabeth, and they just operated so differently, it was almost hilarious from the accounts. They tried a few exercises and tests. Schumacher, similarly, if you were the USN, getting German battleships doesn't make sense, but their battlecruisers, on the other hand, would have made a lot of sense for the USN. They would have certainly been interesting for the USN to have. But they would have already been weaker than the British battlecruiser, which is Hood, which is the other thing is, why does Britain want a battlecruiser which is less capable than the ones itself is building? That's the other trouble with the German ships. They're not as good as the British ones, and the British know that by that point. Different engines, different guns, different everything, and no spare parts of experience using them. Just too much extra work. Yeah, there's tons of problems. A famous naval historian posited that the thinly armored Lexingtons came about because the Americans got a copy of the suppressed Jutland battlecruiser report. Thoughts? I doubt they'd have been that thinly armored if the Americans got a copy of the suppressed report. There's no real scenario where you'd thinly armor a battlecruiser after reading that report, either the suppressed or the real one. Maybe if they got the real one, the one that wasn't suppressed, the one that was published, sort of thing. Yeah, but If they got they wouldn't build that from the suppressed one. There is no way you would build a ship like the Lexington's from the suppressed one. Honestly, the Lexingtons make sense if you're building a battle cruiser for Pacific operations, where they're based, and if you consider them a scaled version of what the Americans built for the Northamptons, etc., which is a glass jaw, a very powerful warship, but it's basically the Emma Frost of, and if you don't know that, that's the mutant in Marvel universe, who turns into basically a piece of crystal. If you are Emma, you look all amazing and shiny, but if someone hits you with something which is sufficient explosive firepower, i.e. a tank round, etc., you are probably going to shatter into a bazillion pieces. At least that's what I'd be aiming to do. So it's the same philosophy which leads to Northamptons, etc. Everything is built around speed and range. And you've got the firepower, but you've got nothing else. I am going to really need to shore up that thing. I'm probably going to have to put something around the desk. Sorry, I'm looking at the gazebo, shaking the wind and going, yeah, that's going to require me to put something that's going to support it in this corner. Stop it moving too much. Major Villain, I'm fairly sure that the reason Staff Thompson chose the 14-inch gun was because the 14-inch twin is already being built for the King George V, so it's available and in production, whereas a 15-inch twin is not in production at that time. Listen, when does the Falklands Anthology book come out? It doesn't. There were issues. I withdrew from it after my relationship broke up, and as far as I understand it, it didn't get through the publishing stage. Sometimes these things happen. No matter how good an idea, no matter how much work put in it, no matter how much people care about it, it just doesn't work out. Actually, the report by Goodall on the comparison of the Bayan versus British ships is worth a read. It is a very good report. And you can definitely tell the Americans didn't get that report if they were designing Lexingtons as they were. Let's see, in context of Lexingtons, what ships did the IJN have that was a threat to them? Basically anything. Because, to put this, they have pretty much no armor. So even the Congos would have been a threat to them. Because the Congos actually would have had, to an extent, more armor than the Lexingtons. And especially after they are upgraded. So the upgraded Congos or any of the battle cruisers the Japanese were building would have been a threat to the Lexingtons. Take care, Bishop. You see, the answer to the ideal ships the RN didn't build was renowned triple 15s. Just keep building those with regular updates for engines and fire control. You never want for anything else. 9 15-inch guns. Yeah, that would have been a fairly useful ship. A fairly useful ship.
especially useful with the combined with the carriers for the carrier operations. Yes, thinking of the King George V of 14, the fact that the one direct bane of existence is Vickers 14-inch salesman. The Vickers 14-inch salesman was far too good at their jobs in the late 1930s, well, the mid 1930s. Which shows the admiral who wanted them instead. It was a bit of an idiot, but oh well. Yeah, Chatfield was an interesting officer. The 14 inches instead of 16s or updated 15s. Updated 15s would probably be the best scenario because you could update all the existing 15-inch gun ships in service. So if you produced the Super 15-inch, the enhanced one, and gone for an updated version of that, stop eating green stuff. 15-inch 48 or something like that would have been a really useful gun. Thank you. And your sister thinks she's gone around and got all these out of the garden. So if you're still getting the seeds in your ears, she's going to be really upset. Right then. I will probably not do this the same length as I normally do because there are other people sitting in their gardens wanting to enjoy their summer evening. So I'll probably finish this in about probably the 2.5 hour mark. So about another 14, 15 minutes. And the reason is I don't want to keep disturbing people in their gardens. And I am doing it from my garden, which is lovely for me, but it's terrible for them because they've got someone talking the whole time. Lance, as you stated in your Northumberland class, it was not a heavy cruiser but a scout cruiser. What is this true heavy cruiser? Who does the cannonball look like? You have to get to World War II, and you have to look at some of the ships that come out. But honestly, I would say Alaska class is probably about the level at which I would expect actually a true heavy cruiser of that period, if they'd been building, would be about level of what they'd be aiming for. So that's about the level of a heavy cruiser and what it should have been. The 15-inch Mark II would, according to Naval weapons, would have been lighter and longer. Yep. In 15-inch 50s on all the QEs, Renowns, and Hood, I'm getting warm feelings. It would have been certainly interesting. And probably, again, also with the R-Class. They'd have upgraded them as well. So, especially Royal Oak. And your King George V probably would have been 9 15-inch guns in 3 triple turrets, which would be an interesting collection to have. RG, fun idea. Taking from the final countdown, what would have been the performance in World War II of USN units and alternate history RN, CVN, or civil society, ignoring the logistics? Overwhelming, because you could have kept those at sea pretty much indefinitely. Nuclear-powered ships, as long as you can resupply them with food and weapons and probably rotate in and out personnel, you could keep at sea indefinitely, and so you could do some truly amazing operations. And the sheer amount of air power they come with, especially the things like Hawkeye, etc., airborne early warning, that would just be revolutionary. In the Mediterranean, that would turn the air war on its head. It would basically make every carrier a floating air group assassin. Software, thank you for clearing up the supercruiser. Would the Iron have benefited from them if they were allowed to build them? If they were allowed to build them, they would have been useful. Anything that size is going to be useful, especially when you're dealing with the disparate links of Deutschland class, the Italians, the Germans, and the Japanese. You need more ships. Ooh. The Clone of how irritating is for General MacArthur for the Australians. A lot of sympathy for General Barrett's by for them to put up with him. Frank's one, Darcy, Arc Royal teleports into your carrier battle of choice. Which one and what does it do? If it teleported into Operation C, into the British battle group for Operation C, and they launched Night Strike, which didn't get lost, that would be seriously interesting point of war. That would be a very interesting point. There are other battles I could have it teleport into, which would be interesting, but honestly, Ark Royal with the Eastern fleets as it was, and being a free carrier force with all the extra aircraft that would give, would have really been an interesting night strike if it had delivered against the Japanese. Been a really interesting night strike. How much more resin do you need for your office? I've basically got another 2 loads coming, so I'm going to put down another 40 kilograms worth of I put down 40 for roughly 50 kilograms, and the new packs come in a 20 kilogram bag, so it's going to be about 40 kilograms. I'm going to go down of concrete, so it's going to be about 90 kilograms of concrete powder plus 20 liters of the rubber stuff you mix in, plus probably about 4 liters of water mixed into it. So the office floor is going to be interesting when it's done. Was there an attempt to lengthen the 15 to 42? So don't look, had it go and whether it was not adopted. They did look at it, and basically they had the choice of doing an improved 15-inch gun or going to 14-inch gun, and we all know what Chatfield insisted. Chatfield insisted on the 14-inch gun. Ark, you need an aircraft with fuel. Yes, but that's what replenishment at sea is for. Mm-hmm. An all 15-inch battle line helps a fleet, helps the Iron logistics so very, very much. Yes, it does. It would be a very efficient as geosubstance was, and it would have been far more useful. Direct rule from Petrograd. Hello. How's the office floor? It's getting built. It's going to need. It's still drying. Oh, so sure. Wouldn't the mass of the 3 extra guns be problematic? On a renowned style hull, you could adapt the hull. It would need to be slightly longer and slightly thinner, but it wouldn't still be anywhere near hood length. Slightly longer, slightly fatter, but it could still keep the proportions. And the 3 extra guns, you could work it out. Honestly, renowned style hull is very adaptable. For the King George V's, well, you go for a quadruple 14 is a lot faster than a treble 15, and you would technically have 9 15-inch guns versus 10 14-inch guns, and so ammunition-wise and everything, it probably works out as pretty much neutral. Could any other carrier have survived the battering the illustrious took in Operation Excess? Probably has assisters, but those are about the only ones. That's not a Canara. If I could teleport the Ark Royal into any battle, it would be to think of Repulse and Burn as Wells. No, it wouldn't be Ark Royal. It would send to the Repulse and Burn as Wells. That would be good to have her at, but in honestly, no, she's not my first choice for that. That would be an armor carrier. I would probably want Implacable or Indefatigable. If I could have one of those there, that would be. They could provide all sorts of air defense and support, and would probably win it. Ark Royal would do well too, but remember, she's not the armored carrier. She's a good strike tool. If she's operating with armored carriers, she's a very dangerous strike tool, but she's not an armored hangar carrier. She's not designed to take the pounding they are. She is very strong though. She is designed to be very strong, but she's step on the progression too in terms of design terms, but they make the choice not to have the armor so they can have the increased air group because of a strike roll. And then the other carriers are the fleet roll, and they're less strike orientated, so they can take the reduced air group and in turn have more of the armor. Are you using a self-leveling cement mix? Yes. Barrel of the Pike, but Grass Bay has 4 Elbings as escorts, and Ajax is swapped for 2 tribals and 2 battles. Ouch. Ouch. That's a lot of torpedoes, which are going to be hitting the Grass Bay. And I'm not sure how the Elbings managed to get there in the first place, but good luck to them. Let me see, Dr. C, how is the condition of Ark wreck? The last photos I've seen came from the book research about it, and it seemed to be in okay condition. There's Fox. If an armored carrier had been sent to the Far East with the Prince of Wales and Repulse, how will it affect their use, and how does it change the agents as a threat assessment? It means that they have radar, radio, and their own organic fighters to protect the battle group. And they also have their own strike groups. So, yeah, the carrier will be #1 target for the Japanese. But honestly, if they had the same scenario happen, they'd have found themselves in a lot of trouble coming in those formations because the fighters could have pounced on them. And you have to remember, the fighters don't have to do... One of the things people often talk about is they concentrate on air-to-air kills. That isn't what matters. If a fighter aircraft can disrupt a strike so that instead of you dealing with 4 simultaneously aircraft or 8 aircraft attacking, you're dealing with aircraft attacking in 1s and 2s on a ship, you make the task of air defense of that ship and maneuvering to avoid the attacks so much easier. So that's what the air group assists. If they take them out, that's great. That's a benefit. If they disrupt them, that's enough. So yeah, any aircraft which can do that, and the air defense radar, etc., and all those things, that just provides the ability to do it. It also means you can probably have tighter coordination with land-based aircraft as well, and have those fighters come and support. It does change the IJN's threat assessment, but you know they still might launch the strike. But if they get defeated, then it changes operations. And it also could lead to you having a different scenario, because if you have one carrier out there with a strike thing, if you consider what happens with the Rapid Organization Eastern Fleet after they get sunk, if you have this operation they survive, you could get similar reinforcements go out to this Force Z to form an Eastern Fleet, and that force where would it have been based from? Probably would have moved to Australia and be based in Southeast Asia. And it would be a very interesting force to see what would happen. Interesting, given the attacks by an escorted bombers, even a full Maroni carrier could have perhaps won the day. True, but there wouldn't have been a full Maroni carrier around at this point. There'd have probably been some Hurricane-only carriers, but not full Maroni carriers. Question about Patreon. In the event of joining, is there an appropriate way of phrasing the questions to be nominated? No. Basically, unless a question is absolutely impossible for me to do in the time allowed, and I usually base that on research requirements to produce it, and I'll explain that in the case, then I put it through to the vote of the patrons, and then the patrons get to choose. I have noticed certain questions are more likely to be voted for by the patrons, but that's I leave to people to figure out. Because I think they have a hard enough task with voting without them giving away that they have a sort of slight leaning in terms of phrasing the questions. And thank you for joining. So how much would 4C have benefited from a full destroyer squadron escort? It would have been nice. More a case would be what would a destroyer going to be. The more modern and better air defense they could provide, the better. Listen, would the quad 6-inch turrets have suffered the same issues that the quad 14 suffered? Potentially. There's a reason they weren't actually fitted. Although it would have been still good to see them. So, yeah, would an F-35B be a useful carrier fighter bomber in World War II? Yes. Yes, it would be. But the only one which would be useful, because the only one can really go slow enough of the current one, the current jet fighters, that can actually probably engage proper aircraft. Definitely could pick and choose its engagements. But did the RN have any plans to build a heavy cruiser class or York class cruisers? They were looking at it, but they decided to go with the 6-inch cruisers until the treaty limit ran out, and then they were planning a 9.2-inch cruisers. Sea Hurricanes were they're about as effective as you think they're going to be against with rockets versus submarines and light craft. If they get a hit, they're very lucky, and they won it. Right, as said, I'm going to start wrapping up now because of people in their gardens and wanting to be nice. So, I'll answer the last questions, but thank you very much everyone for watching. Thank you for all the super chats. Thank you for all the likes and support. It all means a lot, and I hope you've enjoyed this. And hopefully I'll be back in my office soon, and I'll be able to record the videos for this week, because I haven't got them recorded because it was all supposed to be done. Because everything had been worked out in theory. I had bought enough. That was theoretically for 8 meters squared worth of concrete, right? For an office, which is 2.5 by 2.6 meters, which by my counting, and this, 2.5 times 2.6, that equals, and it's again, might be interesting to you, 6.5 meters squared. So, it should have been more than enough material. However, turns out it wasn't. As I said, the floor turned out to be very porous, and I've bought another 8 meters squared worth of the material to fix it all up and make sure it's all fine. Which was another, not too bad actually. It's only about another 60 quid. So that's fine. Could have been worse. Okay. What was the role of the What was the role of the Hawkins class? Hunt down surface raiders. Hence the 7.5-inch gun chosen. That was considered fine for that. They were basically large cruisers to hunt down surface raiders. Alistair Shaw, if Force said it had not been sent, do you think the Repulse and Prince of Wales would have been sent with the Indian Ocean raid? Yes, they would have been part of the Eastern Fleet. But they were always they were the ones sent because they were the ones which were considered most viable to be sent in terms of we're not actively using them for other things at this moment. So, could modern attack helicopters dogfight against World War II aircraft? Probably. Depends on how well, but they might actually be the best thing for trying to take out a swordfish. Thank you, Sage. Thank you, Frank Posado. Thank you, Melanie6240. Thank you, Nook. Thank you, Matrix Verdun. Thank you, Peter Effen. Thank you, DG40. Thank you, Night Coach Run. We'll need to think up questions next week as Formula 1 in France is in 2 weeks. Oh, cool. I know. I'll take him. Francis Fox, did you get scammed with the concrete? No, it's fairly decent stuff. It's just, in the nicest way, as said, the floor turned out to be even more porous than I thought it was going to be. The amount of holes in that floor from the nails and the nail guns, because, as said, the builders we had who, me and Drac ended up having to chuck off the job and do it all again. Very nice, he came over and helped with that one, scenario. Were interesting and had relayed the floor 3 times. Not sure why my floor got such special treatment. Seriously, where are you getting all those seats from? Right. Thank you, Southland. Thank you, 9640. That depends entirely how thick they figure the 8 square meters at. The 8 square meters are supposed to be 5 mil thick. And I'm doing this for 4 mil thick, was what I was aiming for. Take care, Alistair Shaw. Thank you, Andrew Paul. Thank you, JML. Thank you, South Thompson. Thank you, everyone. Costrousers. Thank you. Take care. Game night. Doxy, whose morale would have been lower by 1945 among the expats? The Kriegsmarine or the IJN? Oh, the Kriegsmarine. The IJN's morale was never disturbingly low. Drac is a very nice dude. Are the FRA's roughly research assistants' ears healed? Yes. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy. Thank you. And thank you all. Right. So I'm doing this on the phone. So when I do it on the phone, it is going to be quick. It's warm, but it's okay. Take care, Desert Foxo. Thank you, everyone. Take care.